For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. First of all, the Fed, as expected, raised interest rates just a little bit instead of the feared 0.5%. And that really had an effect through Asia. I'll come on to the details of that in a moment. The Nikkei's up, Hong Kong's up, and also the Shanghai Composite up very, 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 very slightly. But you can see there's a rough sense of relief that the Fed didn't raise 0.5%, but just 0.25%. I'll come on to that in just 1 second. I have to tell you that I'm not an equipment catalogue, but it's worth noting Samsung is just coming out with its new Galaxy S23 smartphone. This is, of course, better cameras, gaming facilities, and so on. I merely mention this because although Samsung is quite an event within itself, the actual export of smartphones from South Korea has fallen, as we were noting yesterday. So an economy really with the lowest export levels for a very, very long time. I'm going to take you to India and a company you're going to be hearing a lot of. This is called Adani, and basically there's a lot of legal problems with this company, but they've called off a 2.5 billion share sale. Gautam Adani is one of India's richest people. He's a billionaire. They are accused by another group of stock manipulation and so on, and it's extremely likely that the Indian equivalent of the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, will be investigating the company. So in other words, that's actually called off, and stock losses have exceeded $100 billion as a result of that. Now to Sri Lanka, and it's celebrating, if you can call it like that. Well, it's noting its 75th anniversary of becoming independent. It's basically still bankrupt. The future looks very bleak. Apparently, there's a $2.9 billion bailout which is looming from the World Bank. That does look likely, but that's not going to do them any good. They've defaulted on $50 billion worth of loans and $50 billion worth of foreign debt. So there is a long way to go in this country. We know that the previous president went to Singapore. He resigned by email. The new chap has come in, but the problem still apparently is government corruption. Until that's actually put right, then Sri Lanka will remain dependent upon the support of countries like India and China, which it's sort of getting at the moment. But it really needs to reboot itself, and it'll be very, very difficult indeed. Let's go back to the United States, and Jay Powell was saying it is literally, he said it's premature to say the battle against inflation is over. As we all anticipated, interest rates up there 0.25%, but they are now watching jobs data very, very carefully indeed, and he remained hawkish. In other words, he's saying to the markets and saying to investors, look, yeah, we have slowed down, but we're still really based on inflation, and don't expect anything to happen markedly about interest rates probably until the middle of this year, 2023. Meta, which used to be called Facebook, that's beaten its expectations, but the actual investment into AI has lost the company $4.28 billion. Investors still like it, though. It's still considered to be going in the right direction. This is where Mr. Zuckerberg, Mark Zuckerberg, thinks that the future of the company actually lies, and he's willing to spend that. Share price is up 19% on those results, even though they recorded huge losses. To the UK, and the strikers, the Bank of England is set to raise interest rates here without question, and the 10th time in a row, and it's expected to be up by about 0.25%. The UK Bank, the Bank of England, the UK Bank of England is making it much is trying to stabilise the markets that were interrupted by that brief flurry in bond yields. So you remember that when after the failed mini budget here and so on, they're expecting to try to strengthen that, and also the UK, as you know, in the middle of enormous strikes at the moment. You're talking about teachers, you're talking about train drivers, you're talking about civil servants, and so on. And those strikers have been sending sending a very, very strong message to the government saying, we are going to do this, and the government's digging in, and the Prime Minister is saying at the moment, well, he'd like to give more wages, but the country can't afford it at the moment, and so it goes on. There's no end in sight to that at the moment. Oil, OPEC stayed with its present plans at the moment. The OPEC is still monitoring what's going on in China and Russia, but prices declined really. The long and short of it is, and Shell, of course, recorded record profits. That's the breaking news. Record profits of $39.9 billion clearly on rising energy prices. Will that continue the course for windfall taxes? Yes, of course it will. And finally, as far as commodities are concerned, iron ore prices could be rising. India, which is one of the world's biggest exporters of iron ore, that's gone down 90%, and thus there's a feeling that the rest of the world needs to catch up, and therefore iron ore prices will rise. Australia is the biggest, followed by Brazil. And then China, India is up there with them, but as their exports have fallen so much, it's likely that iron ore prices will rise. That is the global view this morning.
Thank you, Michael. Unfortunately, we've run out of time for this segment, but thank you all the same. Now, for business updates across the African continent, Rotus Odiri will be joining us shortly. Welcome back. You are still watching the Arise News channel. Now for business updates across the African continent, Rotus Odiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, viewers. I know we're pressed for time, so let's run through this as quickly as possible. The Ministry of Finance Incorporated, the President has tasked the Ministry of Finance Incorporated, which actually precedes Nigeria's independence. I think this act was set up in 1954 or 57 or so, where the MOFI is supposed to act as some kind of custodian of assets, asset manager for the government-owned assets that are held by the federal government of Nigeria. And I must understand they valued the assets at 18 trillion. The president says that should be bumped up to 100 trillion over the next 10 years. They've done a board reshuffling. I think we're supposed to hear from the Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, in about 6 minutes or so from Abuja, where she's going to be giving some kind of breakdown on economic growth. They have boards. They've got a governing council. I think the president is chair of that council. How they do that, very interesting. Our very own Adeso Almoro, our state correspondent, she asked them, how do you plan on getting your assets from, is it 18 trillion to 100? And they said, well, we need to get the proper asset registry. I think that's one of the things he has tasked them to do. That asset registry, it's interesting how it has not been done. And the timing of all this coming at the tail end of his administration is yet another point to think about. MTN Nigeria becomes the first publicly traded company on the Nigerian exchange to earn 2 trillion naira in revenue. They first crossed the 1 trillion naira mark, I think, in 2019. That was then a record. Only about 3 years. COVID year.
No, it was 2019. Yes.
COVID year, they did, I think it was 1.6 or so. They hit another milestone. Voice is up to 1 trillion, data up to about 740 something billion. I think so. They're just, I mean, it's incredible stuff. Banking. I don't know if you've seen this video of this gentleman. No, Starlink. Let me get to Starlink first, actually, before we get to the bank. Starlink, they're comparing the speeds. Looks like Starlink is setting a bar for speed as far as megabytes per second, your upload and download times. Oviosu, who is the CEO of Paga, put up a comparison tweet. Now, he didn't say which fiber company it was, but on your left, you've got about 14 megabytes per second, unnamed company, but on your right, you've got Starlink at 230 megabytes per second. Also, latency, which talks about the amount of when you're loaded and unloaded latency, depending on your traffic. Pretty impressive as well, although we don't know which company is on the left. Your average megabytes per second, well, it should be about 100 according to the United States. Nigeria lags, I think your download time is about 11 megabytes per second. Upload is so download is 8, upload is 11. Nigeria ranks about 145th in the world. So Starlink is bringing some competition as far as internet download time, but they are only accepting dollar cards to pay for subscription, which speaks to the issues of FX here in Nigeria. Then the banks. Yeah, I don't know if you saw this video of this gentleman who was stripping down his clothes in a banking center center because he couldn't get access to notes, new Naira notes. So yeah, I mean, you've been seeing people fighting outside and so on and so forth. So apparently, I have it on good authority, just to break this here, that for Naira notes, the banks have now been instructed to dispense the notes for the tellers. I understand before this, of course, it was the ATMs, that was what was causing a whole lot of lines and so on. But now they have been instructed to dispense these new notes through the tellers, which should hopefully reduce the amount of the queues and the lines and so on that we are seeing. But where is that tweet from this influencer? No lights, no fuel, no cash, bank apps failing. We've never had it this bad. You've got just an absolute plethora of issues. But despite all this, the Nigerian Stock Exchange yesterday was up by 49 basis points.
I mean, that's to show
it's
you
a very very disconnected.
No, that's to show you that there's some still prospects, despite how bad things are in this country.
Well, we'll talk about that tomorrow.
I'll get into economy MTS making 2 trillion now. What are you saying?
I know,
what
but
are you saying?
The stocks.
Don't badmouth Nigeria.
Fine, okay. Ghana, the IMF, with all the issues that Ghana is facing, the IMF still talking up Ghana's mining sector. Ghana's mining sector contributed 14% to their GDP and about 2% to employment. This is the second time in 3 weeks they're talking about mining from South Africa to Ghana. Despite all their issues, I think they're projected to grow almost 3 point something percent this year with all the issues Ghana faces. Finally, Egypt, speaking of stocks, the Prime Minister, Mr. Modalbi, in Egypt, saying that they are looking to add 20 new companies to the Egyptian market. When last did you get 20? You're talking about bad mouthing. When last did you get one company listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange? When last?
No.
When last you get two?
It's not that it's not that companies can't list, but you know what? A lot of them, especially the tech company, the Delaware effect, when they register in Delaware, they are making the money here. You know, so let's not reveal the secrets. I mean, so I'll just keep quiet. But you see, despite everything that is bad, and Rotus, I'm not exonerating the fact that things are bad around.
Yeah.
I still believe, like I always say on the show, Nigeria is not a hopeless case.
Right.
And look at the MTN story. This is a company that came in the early 2000s in this country.
Yep.
And see how they've been able to grow over the years. And at the same time, it's not only MTN. Other telco companies are doing very good in terms of rev too in this country. In fact, I have always scratched my head that the third telco company that is a private company, only God knows how much cash they have. I don't want to mention it. You know the name.
Why haven't they listed?
They're not listed. They're a private company.
That's what I'm saying. As good as things are, why haven't they listed on the exchange?
No, why they've not listed might be due to their own personal reasons.
Right, okay.
But it's not that the rev book of that
It's not good.
Because knock on wood, if you look at the data revenue for that company compared to MTN, it will fight MTN's data revenue.
So let them list on the exchange.
So, but no, anybody knows why they're keeping that. But it just shows that things,
Yeah.
I think concerning the policy, I'm happy about the new one that, the CBN has done that, said, okay, you can go and withdraw money. But they should work more the logistics of the process, so it's going to be available for everybody. But Africa is blessed, and I hope there's a day that we can also be making money for mining.
Oh, yes.
Well, it's good that cashiers now have been are likely, until we see it, we believe it, to be told to now dispense, the new notes through the counter. But what many people have discovered is that many of these banks have been saying that, in fact, even the notes that were not redesigned are not available.
Yeah.
So it's only in Nigeria that you will have a bank and you go there and the bank will say it has no money.
No money.
Even when it is just 3, denominations that have been redesigned. That has to be addressed. And, efforts should be made to ensure that these banks get enough of the notes.
Yeah.
As for SpaceX Starlink coming to Nigeria, yes, I think the competition is welcome.
Yeah.
SpaceX was advertising yesterday that Nigeria...
Starlink, you mean?
Starlink, rather. SpaceX is owned by SpaceX.
Well, that's true, yes.
Elon Musk,
Yeah,
SpaceX. So the appropriate name is SpaceX Starlink.
Yeah.
Now, they were advertising yesterday that Nigeria is the first country in Africa and the 47th in the world to have that facility, where Nigeria is the biggest market anyway in Africa. But the major problem is that the pricing. Ooh. For you to get the hardware, you are required to pay about, was it $278,000?
$600, which is about $278,000.
Yeah, about $278,000.
Yeah.
And then monthly subscription of $19,000, $20,000.
Yeah.
Well, the whole idea of the competition, from the consumer's end is that prices will go down, and that the broadband penetration of Nigeria will increase in line with the national, broadband plan 2020 to 2025. As for the Ministry of Finance Incorporated, we don't have a register of national assets.
Doctor, can you imagine?
It's a scandal. It's only now that Nigeria wants to create a consolidated register of assets.
After 8 years.
And they say assets worth 18 trillion. That's less than that 22 trillion of ways and means.
It's even more than that.
Scandal. Let me quickly touch on two things. First is MTN's results. Very, like Rufai said, positive news, particularly in the face of so many things you can complain about the nation. However, one part of the report talks about the fact that they were the first telecoms company, organization, to penetrate with 5G. However, this 5G story we've been hearing, but we haven't been able to feel, see, or use. And one of the complaints that they had made in a report recently was the right-of-way, the charge of the right-of-way, which has prevented them from penetrating in certain states. And this is a conversation we have to revisit. We've talked about it a number of times in terms of how much is charged for these, telcos, and how the affordability of it and who they pass that cost burden to. Then, of course, in terms of the scarcity of nodes, I just wanted to talk about the impact on the most vulnerable in society and also the value of Naira. So I was having a conversation before the show that I went to the POS and I paid 1,000 Naira for 10,000. I remember that the value of that money was now 9,000 Naira.
Imagine.
So talking about the impact and the far-reaching, I'm excited about this over the teller, but most importantly, I would say is that to make these notes available.
Well, thank you very much,
Thank you.